What would be a relevant topic? It feels to me like there are a lot of content creators and creatives and designers that do a great job of focusing in on the work. And they want the visual communication to be effective and really beautifully designed. And I think there are a lot of strategists and planners and marketers that appreciate that to a point. They know that the content needs to be amplified and needs to be as well communicated as possible, but there still can be some disconnect between those two camps. So that's what tonight's presentation is about. So maybe another show of hands, how many of you consider yourself a designer or a content creator of some sort? Wow, so that's most of us. And then how about a strategist, marketer, planner type? Okay, so there's some overlap there. That's good to see, because I think that that's really important for those two camps to be able to communicate effectively. That can be difficult sometimes. And I'll kind of circle back to a recent conversation I had, an opportunity for a certain position with a company that I had worked for more than 3 years. That was really relevant to this, and it really opened my eyes up to what I was focusing in on for a really long time versus what I could have been focusing in on. And that's something that I wanted to discuss tonight too. So on that note, yeah, let's get started. So yeah, as Donna said, I'm just using Prezi, which is kind of a cool presentation software just because it has some fun little animations. You can control it from your phone. I use this with my influential infographics design class too, and we get into that application just a little bit, but most of that class is about using charts and data in a beautifully communicated way so people can look at an infographic and understand what you're trying to portray. But it's not just about data, statistics, percentages. It's really about creating a visual that is easily digested and easily shared. And there's a lot of SEO benefit to creating that type of graphic. So SEO being search engine optimization, if you can pile in things like lists and collected data, curated pieces of information that kind of causes your audience to say, I just learned something that's really interesting. I'm going to share this on Pinterest or share this on Instagram. Then you're able to sort of connect and have the impetus for viral content. So that class is an interesting one. That's April 11th. So if you're interested in learning about that, please join us. Okay, so starting with, we want to connect your creative to the strategy. The very first thing is that and I'm going to kind of change and customize this presentation a little bit, knowing that the majority of people in this room are people like me that love making things, that love designing, that love working with typography and color and shape and images. And if that's the case, then I can speak to you as designers, as fellow designers, and then maybe just kind of pull us over to the dark side of spreadsheets and Excel and all the reporting that we probably should be paying attention to. But it starts with know yourself, and it's not just about you as individuals. It's about buying into your organization's values. So the slide says, branding is about establishing cultural values and is a promise to deliver consistency in experience and quality. So say what you will about the fast food industry. If you go to any Wendy's or McDonald's or whatever across the country, you're going to get a really similar experience. And some people really like Wendy's as compared to McDonald's or Hardee's or whatever. And they know that as they're traveling, they can go into one of those establishments and get a consistent experience for the most part, good or bad. They can get a consistent experience, and that's what a brand does. It establishes a value, establishes cultural values, and then it attempts to create that experience over and over and over again, because you don't want it to waver. You might really like and enjoy an experience with a product, and then the next time you have an opportunity to experience that product, if it's totally different, then you lose faith in that brand. So that's what it means to know yourself. You have to know your organization's brand values. And if you're just starting up, if you're in business for yourself, it's important for you to establish what those are. Because it's really difficult as an organization to try to be all things to all people. I work with a lot of freelance clients, and I get that response quite a bit when I'm asking them about, okay, who are you? What do you represent? Who do you want to market your product or service to? And a lot of times the response ends up being, well, this is for everyone. This is for kids 3 years old to 90, and we're living anywhere in the world, male and female. And it's kind of like, okay, let's see if we can edit that down into something that's a little more targeted. But, and when you're proud of a product that you've developed, you want it to be relevant to any and all people. That's just not the reality, though. So you have to know yourself. So then that helps you, once you've established those brand values, and you know the culture that you want to create around an organization, that's going to help inform a voice. And that's something that a lot of people can buy into, because it's tough with an organization to have one person who really understands the voice, who really understands the brand, doing all the content creating on behalf of that organization. So you have to have a set of rules. That's what a brand identity is for. Ways of speaking. Do we use, third person or first person? Are we, using certain colors and not others? What are the typefaces that we're going to be using? So if people can have these guidelines, then they can buy into that and understand it. Then they can speak intelligently on behalf of that organization. So you don't have one person that's doing all of the content creation. And for those of you that manage social media, you know that's a huge job. Because it's not just about publishing and broadcasting to a nameless, faceless audience. You're trying to engage people on a personal level through social media, and if you're doing a good job, people are responding. So then it becomes a dialogue. So then you don't really know how much time it takes for you to create that one post, because it's not just about establishing a schedule and saying, we're going to post to Facebook and Twitter and Instagram 3 times a week, and then, okay, my job's done. I did those 3 posts, done. Well, then that's where it starts. Because if it's effective, then you're creating a dialogue, and the communication loop keeps coming back. So how do you manage that? That's a big job. So know your audience. In an effort to increase sales, using marketing strategies and campaigns to learn about your customers can help drive content and voice. So we're starting with the brand. You've got to start by really digging in and knowing everything there is to know about your brand and cultural values. And as designers, the designers in this room have to own that, because it's our job to protect the brand. We may want to be creative because we're sick of using the same font over and over and over again, but just because we're doing that day in and day out doesn't mean that we've been able to contact and share that with all of the possible customers or potential customers that you can reach. So sometimes you really get sick of your own brand. That's okay. Keep at it. You got to keep at it. So learning about customers can help drive content and voice. One of the things I like about that part of knowing your audience is it's not about having a home run campaign every time your team puts together a marketing strategy. Sometimes it's about trying something that is measurable, seeing if it works, and if it doesn't, then at least maybe have a way to report on it, have some data that backs whether you were just targeting the wrong audience, using the wrong demographics, whether it's like, Facebook ads or Google AdWords, and then being able to just say, okay, here's the content, here's who we were targeting, it failed miserably, let's figure out why. And it's how many other campaigns are running at the same time. And if you don't know what's working and what isn't, then it's really hard to track those measurables. So it's okay if things fail sometimes. We hear that all the time. Everybody talks about, it's okay, you fail more, fail faster. Well, part of that is not just about failing, it's about being able to do a bit of post-mortem on it and figure out where it might have gone wrong, and maybe a little tiny tweak is going to help it be successful the next time around. Sometimes those tweaks are really minimal, like if you add a picture of a person on an ad instead of a picture of a product. Maybe it needs to resonate with somebody who needs to see a face, especially because, Facebook is able to detect faces and say, hey, who's this? That's some pretty cool stuff and pretty advanced stuff. So one little tweak, maybe it's in like an A/B testing type of environment where you create the same exact copy and just change the image, same targeting for your audiences, send that out, and then come back to looking at the results, come back to it and say, okay, what was successful and what wasn't. But you have to know. You have to have some way to report back to it. Us designers, we don't really like that part of it. We like how beautiful it looks when it goes out the door, but we're on to the next thing. So we have to be able to go back, look at the campaign, see how long it was out there, and do a bit of postmortem on it and say, okay, how could we have changed this to make it successful? Or the ideal scenario is that was a huge hit. How could we can and clone that? Let's see if we've tapped into a vein. That happened recently with a company that I had done work for as a digital media design manager. And we did a case study, a video case study on a company that was using 3D printers. The company I was working for made 3D printers, and they were using 3D printers to create car parts and custom car parts. And that video did so well. It was, after 2 weeks, there were 90,000 viewers on that particular video between Facebook and YouTube. And some of that was paid, but a lot of that was organic. But some of the things that we were really interested in was the dialogue part of it. So it wasn't just about the views, it was about other car restoration companies in the comments saying, whoa, that is really cool, and then sharing that with their boss or sharing that with somebody else. We were looking at those comments saying, there's a lead, there's another lead. We pulled a ton of leads from that. And so, we hit this vein, the next thing you know, we scheduled out a lot of content that was directed toward the automotive industry, and it really affected sales well. But we weren't really sure. We just took something out of all of our customers and thought, that's kind of interesting. I think, the product looks like it's very industrial, like it would fit in a car shop. That's not something we have thought of. So we decided to kind of focus in on it and then amplify it, and it resonated with folks out there on YouTube and on Facebook. That was huge. And we saw sales shoot through the roof over the next 6 weeks after that. So sometimes it's about, being able to kind of look at it and say, instead of just throwing together a bunch of ad hoc campaigns and hoping something works, and when something does work, not knowing if it was either this piece or this piece, there's got to be some way to kind of unify all of that, or at least report back on how the campaigns are doing. So that's why, knowing the brand ends up being really, really important, because then there's a consistency of voice. If you can target certain audiences that resonate with your brand values, then it's not about sort of a bigger, broad broadcast message. It's about making sure that there's enough of a reach that the people who align with your values because you've established them, that they're coming out of the woodwork. So it's creating a concentration of consumers and audiences that are relevant to your message. We get caught up in trying to chase after the millions and millions of users on the different social media channels, or using Google Analytics to make sure our website is just it has so much reach that that we think, okay, the more people that see us, that's where we're going to get those leads. It's about the right people. So establishing the culture, establishing the brand values helps pull those people out of the woodwork. That requires a voice, and it requires consistency. As designers, we have to keep that in mind. So the more we know about the brand, the more we can make sure that our content is doing what it needs to do. So knowing that an organization can't be all things to all people can make the best use of time and resources, because it's targeted. You know that we've hit that vein. We're going to see a huge return on the investment of time that we're putting into video content, to ad campaigns, print, and web media. So that's where you want to establish ways of reporting on the success of marketing campaigns. How does that help inform a holistic view of strategy? A really good way to do that, and it's still a very relevant way of doing that, is just use something like Constant Contact or MailChimp, and making sure that you're collecting a lot of information from the people that are subscribing to those newsletters, so you can segment out those lists. Because the worst thing that we can have in our inbox is something that just isn't relevant to us. We want to feel like it's very personalized and relevant to us. So, using an email engine like that is really helpful. All right, so some successful marketing strategies to keep in mind. So you start with a compelling story. We hear a lot about storytelling in marketing these days. And I made a note. This was from a Forbes magazine. Steve Alinsky wrote an article on Forbes called The 6 Essential Elements of an Effective Marketing Strategy. And I love this quote. It says, storytelling, the product or service takes audiences from where they are now to an ideal scenario in which their lives are improved. That's awesome because, you know, when we're talking about commercial art, like I started as a fine artist, a painter, wanted to draw. Then I had a wife and a family that I needed to pay some kind of bills for them. And it wasn't going to happen if I was sketching and doodling. So commercial art became like selling out a little bit. It felt like that. There are these pockets of creativity that help me really understand the difference between art and design. Both of them share the same root. But the thing that I liked about it was that art, in a lot of ways, can be for the sake of expression, whether that's the expression of the artist or for the audience to be expressive. Like if you're standing in front of an abstract expressionist painting, you don't have to get what that artist was putting on canvas. But if you're interacting with it and you have this emotional response, then that makes that piece of artwork really effective. But that doesn't mean that I have to have the same response that you do. When it comes to art, we can have different responses and it's okay. That's why, especially in abstract expressionism, the artwork a lot of times isn't titled. So sometimes you might wonder about that. You wander into a gallery, you see a bunch of color and shape and texture on the wall, and you just see a bunch of artist names and then it says untitled, untitled, untitled. That's because they don't want to feed you the message. They don't want to spoon feed that to you. They want you to work to interact with it, because the more you interact with that art piece, the more it becomes a part of you. And art is beautiful that way. So, you know, the principles and elements of art share the same root as the principles and elements of design. But the big distinction is that in design, it's about focused communication, where we might come from different backgrounds. We might be different genders, different ages, but good design should pull us together so we are getting the same message out of that design. A lot of times that design is supposed to also encourage us to take action of some sort, whether that's to learn something or to buy something or to check out a product or to sign up for an email newsletter. Every piece of design that we put together should encourage some action at the end of it. And the most successful designs are going to be those that help us go from however our day is. I might have a really crappy day and somebody else might be really happy skipping along. Somebody else might not even speak English, but if we all align in front of that design, whether it's a poster at a bus stop or a billboard or a commercial, if we all understand the same thing about what that design is saying, then that design is successful. In addition to that, if it encourages us to take some sort of action or it teaches us something, then that's even more successful. So we're using the same root. Artists and designers are using the same root, the same set of tools. But what we're trying to do is align the focused communication. So that's really cool. That means that we have to understand something about psychology. We have to understand something about our audiences. We also have to understand that some people aren't going to align. They're not going to get it. But that's why we have to know our audiences. So starting with a compelling story, and as the quote says, and I'll say it again, a product or service takes audiences from where they are now to an ideal scenario in which their lives are improved. And we see a lot of brands that are doing that. I know, I think in these kind of presentations, and I know I've done it before, I'm guilty of it, Apple is always the obvious one. Because you'll never see an Apple ad that says, buy this iMac or buy this iPhone. They don't even say that. That's not even part of their language set. It's more along the lines of, look at how cool we are. And look how cool you could be if you decided to have one of these, It's not about a sale. It's not about bargain basement type of, hey, buy now, get 20% off. You'll never see that with an Apple ad. It's because they're selling a lifestyle where they're painting a picture for how your life could be. And this product is somehow pulling you into that. That's storytelling. When it comes to marketing, that's storytelling. So we can do that. We can identify on behalf of ourselves or our product or our organization, we can define how it should be affecting people. That's what's so interesting about marketing now is, let's say, pre-web, pre-social media, a lot of times you can get away with broadcasting to a nameless, faceless audience in mass media because there wasn't a whole lot of back and forth. There wasn't a whole lot of dialogue. So now you have access to more people than ever, and you have to design the content so it feels like you're speaking directly to an individual. That's a tall order. So those few of us that are the marketers or the strategists in this room, you have a lot of pressure on you to recreate that scenario. And a lot of times, once you feel pretty confident about your strategy, you're going to put together a creative brief and you're going to toss it to the rest of us who are designers, and we're just going to make it look good. We're going to take that copy and we're just going to put it together in a way that we think would communicate really well. But the pressure's not really on us so much as creatives. That's why in most organizations, the creative department, those are those wacky artists that kind of come and go as they please, have all the cool equipment. You know, they have the fun jobs because all they do is make art all day long. There's still a huge amount of pressure because if it's not effective, if they can't pull together the design in a way that affects people, then it all falls flat. Then you have a whole team of people that are copywriters and strategists that are saying, look, the strategy was good, but our designer it totally fell flat. So, bottlenecks down to the designers. And the designers, they are held accountable to multiple people. But the more we understand about the strategy, the more we can defend that work and defend those choices and say, well, this is what I understand about the strategy, and this is why I made these decisions. That's why we set up the photo shoot to do this particular thing. That's why I use this color scheme. That's why the product is shot at this particular angle, because we wanted to make sure that we were fitting within that strategy. This is what I understand. So a lot of times in organizations, the designers are brought in after all of the planning is done. It's like, okay, here, now decorate this thing, make it pretty. But graphic design and content creation is so much more than just decoration. It's about creative problem solving. Ron and I had a discussion earlier about that, about how we were talking about WordPress and programming languages and how that doesn't seem like it's artful or creative or sexy. It can be. It can be a creative problem solving type of environment where, yeah, you may be using HTML tags and attributes and all these different ways to put together scripts to do a certain thing. But there's a lot of creativity in those pockets because you got to make sure that it's effective, that you got to make sure that it's doing what it's supposed to do. And maybe those scripts aren't already out there to just cut and paste into the back end. Sometimes you have to be really creative in problem solving. And it's my contention that that is most valuable in a team. You got to have somebody that pulls together the data. You got to have somebody that makes some decisions on budgets. You got to have an overall decision maker. You have to have somebody who records a lot of the information that's being discussed in a meeting. Got to have somebody who knows everything. Everybody knows that person in a meeting. The know-it-all. They just seem to have all the answers. But the thing I really like, and the thing I take pride in embracing, is being the person with the highest CQ, not the highest IQ. The creative quotient, right? So the creativity quotient is that thing that says, okay, I can generate a lot of ideas from unique perspectives. It doesn't matter how viable they are because any team is going to go through this decision-making process where they know that they need to accomplish something and they'll start with like this divergent thinking. We hear it as brainstorming, right? That's one of the terms we hear. What are some of the other terms for that process? Anybody know? Somebody comes in and says, okay, we're going to have I don't know. There's a bunch of them. Yeah, there you go. There's a ton of them, right? But those buzzwords about, okay, everything goes, it doesn't matter, no stupid answers, that whole thing. It's divergent thinking, where you're trying to create a large pool of possible solutions. And then you edit down into the ones that are the most viable, or the ones that can be executed. So then it converges back to a solution. So you imagine that, most of us are thinking on the right side of our brain. We're visual thinkers. You imagine with the large pool of possible solutions, when you start with that convergent process, it can land on any number of possible solutions. But the larger the pool, the better the end solution could be. And you're just looking for the best opportunity. There's still no guarantees. If any marketing team tells you that they have the absolute formula, scientific formula for growing your business by 600% in the next 3 months, they're lying to you. They don't know. We can start with, get that guarantee, get it on paper. That's right. That's right. Withhold that payment until it happens. Totally, because you hear about it all the time. I spend a good half hour every day with my inbox with, okay, be the top page on Google. And these marketing firms are just constantly saying, we'll make all your dreams come true. It's not going to happen. But that's why it is important to have a strategy that and that you communicate to your client or to your team that this might fail. But even if it does fail, at least we can track it and say, why did it fail? We can come back and try to figure out a new way of doing it. So starting with that compelling story. This is an important one. Develop technical expertise. There are a lot of folks that are very, global thinkers. You hear a lot about right brain versus left brain, where the left brain folks are going to be those linear, logical, sort of time-based. They're keeping people on track. Very important. If the artists were in charge, a business card would take 8 months, and we'd pine away on 50 different iterations of it. That whole global thinking is valuable in itself because you get some really interesting solutions from it. But we also try to convince ourselves that we can just figure it out all the time. You see this all the time, that job postings, when we're establishing content for classes, we'll look through job postings and they'll say, we want you to be able to write beautifully, design our website, control our social media content, manage our newsletter, all of that stuff all in one. It's just unreal. And they don't. And yeah, the title is administrative assistant, right? Yeah, no way. It's just not going to happen. We look through those all the time, and we have laughs about it as a staff. It's just like, okay, that's not going to happen. So you do have to have this technical expertise that says that you are the authority on that particular segment of it. It's good to have a breadth of knowledge, obviously, but being able to specialize and have an identity on your team as saying that's the person you go to for that particular thing, that's a big deal. And that requires a lot of time and effort to get there. I consider myself kind of a generalist, a jack of all trades in a lot of ways. And that's benefited me to a point, but I work with a videographer who's made over 1,200 videos just in the past 6 years. And a lot of his videos, you kind of look at enough of them and there's a bit of a formula there. They're really, really effective, and he turns them around so quickly. And that guy is valuable. He is really, really valuable to the team because he doesn't mess around. He also writes the scripts for this. A lot of times as designers, we will pass off the content creation onto somebody else, and then we'll do the typography and we'll make it beautiful. But we'll just, copywriting is scary. And that's something I'll mention in a later slide. But one of the things that he's done is he's owned the entire process from top to bottom as a videographer. He's more of a director, copywriter. He knows what that video is supposed to accomplish, so it's not just about having a deliverable at the end. We get caught up in that as designers. We just need to hit those deadlines, get that deliverable out there and move on to the next thing. But we also need to know how it's going to affect and how it fits into the overall marketing mix, the bigger strategy. If we understand that, then we make ourselves really valuable to our clients and to our team. If we can articulate that, then that's really valuable too. So develop technical expertise. I would say, we could take 5 seconds right now and maybe you already know this, but take 5 seconds and say, this is what I do. This is who I am. Even if you're not quite there yet, own it. If you can leave here with one thing, it is a trajectory to say, I know that this is my technical expertise. This is the thing that I need to own. Super, super important to do that. When I teach the Adobe classes, one of the things that we'll do is we'll run through, and the class is geared toward people that have never really opened up Photoshop or Illustrator or InDesign, but some people just kind of have dabbled in it a little bit. We'll take a tour of the interface. We'll set up a workspace. We don't do any content creation at all until a good hour into the class. We're just learning how the program works. And one of the things that I'll talk about over and over and over again is proficiency in a program like that doesn't require you to know the entire program from end to end. I would say about 30% of that program, having a depth of knowledge for 30% of that program, for you to be able to do something quicker than anyone else on your team, makes you valuable. And that's what developing technical expertise means. Don't try to know everything about the program because it doesn't make sense. The Adobe developers have designed that program to try to be as versatile for as many different types of professionals as possible. So that benefits the Adobe's bottom line because then they can sell to more people. They're not trying to design it just for one person. The only exception, I would say, is probably Lightroom, where it's really geared toward photographers. Photoshop can do most of what Lightroom does, but Lightroom just sheds away and edits down everything that you don't really need. So then it's really geared toward photographers. But those other programs, they're big. They're big, big programs. So figure out that 30% niche once you know the foundation, once you know how the interface works, and then get rid of all that other stuff that you don't need because it's just visual clutter. Don't worry about the fact that you don't know all of the other stuff, that the other 70% lives in there somewhere. Who cares? Own your part. Develop that technical expertise so you feel that confidence to say, this is what I do. I'm not going to figure it out all the time. That whole on-the-job training thing, that's tough. That's really stressful. Yeah, because you have a deadline, right? It's like you got 4 weeks to build something and you were in that meeting saying, yeah, CQ, I'll do it. Oh my gosh. Yeah, that's why most designers can't really shut off at 5 p.m. Like the people in the accounting office or a lot of our sales teams, they're just kind of like, okay, I'm done. I'm not thinking about this until 8 o'clock the next day. For us, it's going. It may keep us up at night. That's tough. All right, third piece to successful marketing strategies is coordinating your message. So that goes back to the brand. If you're working with a newsletter, that newsletter should have some consistency with other pieces of your marketing mix, whether that's a splash page or a landing page on your website, social media content, even business cards, brochures. There should be a consistent message so we're not throwing people off. We're not confusing the brand. And content marketing leads the charge. So there are a lot of opinions out there about what makes content really, really great and effective. And I think that what we're discovering is authenticity is probably the top of that list. That's going to make your content great. But you can't be authentic without knowing who you are. I know I'm probably like beating a dead horse here, but you have to know the brand. The brand has to be established. Those values have to be established because that's going to inform your copywriting choices. So content marketing leads the charge. If possible, and this doesn't work with every organization, but this does support the authenticity piece of it, if possible, incorporate employee voices. Sometimes there's a trust issue there, because you don't want somebody to speak negatively about the organization, or maybe they don't have as much polish because they're not part of the marketing team. The 3D printing company that I worked for had folks from all walks of life, and some folks you would never think you'd put them in front of a camera and get some feedback or an opinion from them. But they'll surprise you because the culture of the company was about believing in something that was larger than just a job. And that was one of the things that I really appreciated about this particular company. They believed in the values that the company put out there. And one of the things that made my job really difficult, but I understood it, was that this company was 100% open source hardware and free software base. So that meant that we didn't get to use all of the fun tools that most marketing companies can use. We were using Linux machines. We were using Debian operating systems and free software. I don't know if anybody's tried to edit photos in GIMP, but there's a reason it's called GIMP. Yeah, it's terrible. It's terrible. Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right. My goodness, you know, throughout my 3.5 years with that company, I still would teach Adobe classes in the evenings and the weekends, and there was this huge sigh of relief when I'd sit in front of an Adobe interface because it's just industry standard for a reason. So if you ever, you know, bored on a Friday night and you want to have some fun with a program, go ahead and download GIMP and you'll tear your hair out. It's horrible. So, but, you know, everybody in the company from the top to the bottom believed in this philosophy of sharing the technology, innovating without having to, you know, go to the lawyers or having to check it against patents. The company doesn't have any patents. They encourage people to hack the hardware. And one of the coolest things that came out of that was recently, and you guys are very privileged to know this, I'm on camera now. All right, it's okay. So a university took some of those printers and they hacked into the tool head to make it print with tissue, live tissue. And they started printing parts. And so that's being rolled into a product that the company's going to offer. The R&D department didn't develop this. They just set the framework to allow other people to innovate. How cool is that? And now they're coming out with this bio printer, printing body parts. That's in Loveland. Isn't that huge? It's awesome. Yeah, yeah, it is so cool. That company, by the way, it's called Aleph Objects. They do tours every Friday. So, you know, if you're ever in Loveland, 2 p.m. on a Friday, go check out the cluster on the second floor, which is 155 3D printers that are printing parts to make more printers. It's a self-replicating system. Yeah, 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 exactly.
What's the company called?
Aleph Objects, A-L-E-P-H, Objects. They make the Lulzbot line of products. So Lulzbot obviously sounds like a bunch of hackers, right? Their line of products are sold all over the world. It's a really cool company. But hard to work for, I gotta say. They're hard to work for because they're saying, we don't care. This is our philosophy. These are our values. Not everybody's gonna get it. Our competitors think that we're ridiculous because we're using software that puts us at a disadvantage. We don't care. We're gonna stand by it. And so we have a lot of customers that look at that and they respect it and they're like, yeah, open source. And so, you know, we're kind of banking on that. You know, it's tough to bank on something that is a bit on the fringe, but they've been in business since 2011. Forbes, or no, it was Inc. 500 position. They're 122nd on that list in 2016. So there's something there, you know, there's something, and it's all based on values. What's that?
Open source, there always will be.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. I hope so, you know. Even Google has an entire department now that's dedicated to open source. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, you can go onto any website and right-click, look at the source code, and you can see how it's built. Doesn't mean that it's all closed, but you know, the web is a great example of innovation through open source. Really, really cool. That's a value system that has really changed the world in a lot of ways. Yeah. So you can't underestimate what that can do, right? Yeah. It's pretty awesome. So if possible, you know, don't overlook anyone just because of their job title. You know, there are a lot of people that are passionate about the organizations that they work for. This is definitely true in video. You know, when you're looking for people in a case study type of situation, case studies are great because it connects an organization to the user, and then it pulls out a story where that user had some type of interaction that made their job easier, made their life easier. So if you can pull that story out and amplify it, then that's pretty cool. So you want to pay attention to who really believes in what's happening with the product. And then, again, you want to focus on branding, not selling. If you're creating content that is just about promotions, just about selling, then you're not allowing people to develop a sense of loyalty to your brand because they just feel like they're being sold to. We're pretty savvy as consumers anymore. It's been that way for a long time, but it's not like we just want shoes. We want shoes from a company that believes what we believe, right? I think Patagonia is a good example of that. They do their best to source materials in the most sustainable way possible. They, advocate on a lot of kind of social programs that people can get behind. So it's not just about the products. It's about what they believe. I think I'm sorry?
Community.
Yeah, it's about building that community. And that community gets built with that core message, and then they come out of the woodwork, and then it's concentrated. Yeah, that's awesome. And so for those of you that are the marketing folks, the strategists, that's where you get your satisfaction from the job, because the designers have, the cool splash page or the video that everybody's like, oh, you're so talented, you've done such a good job. Yeah, no, I know, I'm off to the next one now. But the marketing strategists are sort of the conductors in the background that are trying to build a community. And it's not as tangible and it's not as fulfilling, but it can be, Exactly. So that's where, when we're talking about connecting the creative to the strategy, it becomes really important to set a baseline. So know where you're at before you jump in and just start doing the job. This is really important in my freelance work. One of the first questions that I'll ask, especially if it's like a web refresh, is I'll put some analytics on the site if it's not there already. Create a couple of reports in that first week and say, this is where we're at. And then that will help me decide where we can go within a certain time frame and then work like a dog to get there. Because if we show that trend line, then I can take that example and bring it over to this client over here and say, this is what happened. It wasn't just about how the website looked. It wasn't about the photography. It wasn't about the copy. It was about what did it do to make an impact to that organization. So you have to establish a baseline first. Know where you're at, and then figure out where you can go. So focusing on branding and not selling. There's a really good principle for content creation out there. You've probably heard of it, the 80-20 rule or the Pareto principle. That's been pretty effective. If I'm putting together a marketing plan or a strategy for a client, I'm going to say, okay, for every 10 posts that you're putting out there on social media, make sure that 8 of them are just information, or they're funny, or they're just building brand loyalty. And then 20% of it could be more product oriented, about a promotion, about a sale or something like that. But it seems like when you start messing with that ratio, you start messing with that threshold, then you start losing your customer's attention. So if you make somebody laugh, that's going to be in that other camp. It's about the informational part of it. If you make them say, oh, that's interesting. I have a client out of Canada, and they do interior design and they specialize in window treatments. And we talked about this in their marketing strategy. And the copywriter did a beautiful job of making sure that that 80% of the content was talking about people's lives. And it's simple stuff like here, the top 5 ways to, there was a recent post. It was the top 5 ways to improve the aesthetics of your home. Another one was about how you can use window treatments to protect your flooring and your furniture because the sun can be pretty harsh. So those are things that are about, okay, that's value to the consumer. Because some of those things can be really expensive, and people spend tens of thousands of dollars to put stuff on their windows. But if it's protecting things inside their home, then it's not about the product at that point, it's about their life, right? So that's that storytelling part of it. But then it feels like they're talking to that person in particular because they have wood floors that need to be protected. They have a faded spot where the sun is constantly beating on that part of the floor. They're like, oh, yeah, window treatments, okay. So Focus in on branding, not selling, the Pareto principle. If you can do 80% informational, 20% promotional, that's a pretty good ratio. So that's us as copywriters, as designers, making sure that we know what the strategy is. That has to be communicated. If you're a strategist, then you want to make sure that your creatives understand that. So they're not just doing like the Starburst 30% off on every ad that they're creating. All right, so now getting into creative deliverables, we'll wrap up. Get long-winded on this stuff, especially this part. Principles and elements. And I did touch on this when talking about the root system being shared between artists and designers. So these are those roots. So if you're a designer that's been working in the field for a while and you haven't seen this, or you're like, oh yeah, I remember that from that Fundamentals of Design class 101 back in school, revisit it, because this can be really good ammunition for you when you're trying to convey why you made certain decisions. And it's a bit of jargon sometimes. So you're like, well, use the complementary color scheme. I made sure that all the warm colors were advancing to the viewer's eye and all the cool colors were receding, so I was really wanting to make sure that the focal point was being emphasized. And your team's like, sounds good to me. Otherwise, it's like, okay, why'd you do that? I don't know, I like purple. That's not the ammunition you need. So use the principles and elements of design to make sure that all of your design decisions are intentional. Know how to describe that, know how to articulate that. Okay. Back to the effective storytelling, this is one of the biggest takeaways from this, is if you are a designer, please don't be afraid to write copy. For a long time, I held that I was not the copywriter because my time was best used beautifying things. Copywriters need to get their stuff done. I was using InDesign to put lorem ipsum inside of a layout and said, okay, hurry up, copywriters, my job's done. Well, it would have benefited myself and the team, and it would have made the design more effective if I had understood what the purpose was and just taken a stab at writing the copy. And it really helps you take an ownership role in those campaigns, because then it really communicates that you understand what the strategy is. Don't just wait for the copy to come to you before you start designing. It's okay to start writing that copy, even if it's just for yourself, because it might affect your design decisions. Don't be afraid to write copy. Effective marketing contains all of the elements of an irresistible story. These include characters, target audience, their challenges, pain points, and motivations, desired outcomes, a setting, connecting the dots, obstacles to the desired outcome, the climax, the value your solution provides, and a conclusion, the delivery of that value. So going back to that quote about storytelling, that it takes the user from where they currently are, and you're painting a picture for where they could be. All right, demand interaction and protect assets. Now, most of us as designers, we look at acronyms, marketing jargon like this, and we're thinking, oh, okay, I hate the buzzwords. It's important for us to know what those things are, because, again, it's emphasizing the fact that we understand what the overall strategy is. So the acronyms and jargon are plentiful in marketing. If you're a designer that turns a blind eye to how your talent and expertise can affect buying decisions, then you may also be missing opportunities to solidify your value to your team and/or clients. Please continue to create beautiful designs, but also know exactly how they fit into the larger marketing strategy and know how they support those initiatives. And part of your role is to understand and protect the brand. Those cultural values that have been established, you understand them, you have to protect them. Because a lot of times you're the last line of defense before things go public. So if something doesn't fit into your brand identity, it's your job to protect it. You have to know what it is. Your portfolio gets you part of the way there. The other part is knowing how to communicate and demonstrate the value of what you bring to the table. So that's that whole part about looking at a trend line and saying, I've done this for this project, or I did this for this client, and being able to can and clone that when you're pitching it to other potential clients. So it's not enough just to be a good designer. I guess that's the whole point. There was an article I read recently that said art directors, on average, spend about 3.5 hours of their 8-hour workday just doing research and looking at the sales numbers, and then they'll spend the rest of their day on deliverables and getting creative briefs for their team together. That's nearly half of their day is just spent diving into the data. That affected me quite a bit because I've been doing the design part for a long time, and I just want to make stuff all the time. I want to be as productive as I possibly can, and I want to pack 8 hours of design into an 8-hour day. I was really missing something, and that became really apparent when I was in an interview from the media design manager position and was going for the VP of marketing position. Before that interview, earlier that day, I talked to a couple of colleagues that were already in VP of marketing positions. 2 of them had been creatives for a long time. And they said, first of all, ask yourself, is that something that you want? Because you're not going to be making stuff anymore. You're going to be putting together the strategy, and you're going to be helping, and you can step back and see it all happen. One of these folks is he's the vice president of brand strategy for CSU, and I could hear it in his voice. He missed his job as a creative director, as somebody who is going to be building things. He loves his job. He loves working for the college. He sees how people interact with a campus experience, and that's really satisfying, but none of those graphics are his. He didn't make any of those design choices. So that was interesting to me. Just before that interview, I had to ask myself, do I want to go into the strategy part of it? Or do I like making the designs? So, if you are interested in that, then make sure that you have a foot in both camps and spend that time. 3.5 hours, that's pretty reasonable, just diving into the numbers. That's pretty cool stuff. So anyway, I don't want to run too long, but you do want to connect your creative to the strategy. Thank you very much for sharing your time with me tonight. And the last thing is recommended next steps. April 3rd, I just plucked a couple of these that I thought were relevant to folks that were attending tonight. Learn the business of photography. So that's kind of the business and the creative part. Don't miss the influential infographic design class. I'm a big fan of that one since I'll be up here doing this thing. April 13th through May 11th is the UI UX Design Certificate Program. And then I'm also doing the Graphic Design Certificate Program in mid-April. So check out those classes and a full schedule at boulderdigitalarts.com/training. And we'd love to see you back in the classroom. So on that note, are there any questions, any thoughts, any experiences that you've had that you might want to share that are relevant? Yeah.
So in that last line of commentary, you were talking about the amount of time people were looking at data. Is that at data like how many visits to their website, or
it could be? Yeah, it's depending on how the organization reports on that sort of thing. But it could be like, customer experience, like the CRM type part of it. It could be Salesforce. They could be looking at prior strategies and how they did, and then tweaking their strategies for the upcoming weeks. It could be looking at competitors. That's a big part of it. Looking at what the competitors are doing, subscribing to competitors' email newsletters, and then picking those apart and saying, okay, do we need to move and jockey a little bit, or are we good to just go ahead and stay that course? Mm-hmm. So, and a lot of it's in industry stuff, overall industry, right. Competitors. Okay. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, and I've tried to do that. I've tried to do that more and more because, to finish up, going into that interview, when they're asking me about the strategic part of it, I was passed over for that job. Part of it was because we already had this sort of creative engine going, but the other part of it was I was lacking a lot of that, and so it's really changed how I approach what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. I really had to understand how it was affecting the larger strategy. So I feel like if I went back into that interview, it'd be a different discussion. I'm in the worst interview ever because during that interview, I actually asked them to check out a friend of mine who would be perfect for the position. A guy at Otterbox. I was like, oh, this would be so perfect for him. Wow, what am I doing? Yeah. So, anything else? No? Yeah.
Just a little curious about your April 11th class. Are you Are you kind of going over best practices? Are you going to use a particular program to
Yeah.
hands-on?
Well, yeah.
Sorry if you have it written up in a description somewhere.
It is, and it's worth checking out. It is a 3-hour, more of a kind of a lecture, but we do, in the last hour and hour 20 minutes, look at Illustrator and vector graphics specifically, taking data and turning that data into charts that are fully customizable. So things that go beyond like the 3D charts in Excel, for instance. You could do something really, really interesting. Do a quick search if you're on Pinterest at all for infographics, and you'll see thousands of these things pull up, these really long infographics that people are, scrolling through, and they're pinning them and sharing them. That's a good place to start.
Right. And subject matter here. I mean, infographic could be so much.
It could
right?
be. It could be. So another part of it is knowing what kind of data to show on the infographic. Part of it is how do you generate internal data, and then how do you compare that to the information that's already out there. So you can make a comparison and say, well, here's what we do, and here's what the rest of the industry is doing. So if you can show that in a digestible manner, then right away it's kind of like, oh, that's why I should go with you for this product or service. So the first half of that really talks about how to the visual communication aspect of it. And then the last part is a little bit more practical, where we're talking about how to actually make charts out of symbols and that sort of thing. It's a good class. It's quick. I always feel like I don't have enough time, but it is definitely worth checking out. So love to see you in there if you can make it. On that note, anything else? We can call it a night, grab a beer on the way out. Yeah. All right. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
This video was produced by Boulder Digital Arts. BDA offers affordable, cutting-edge classes and workshops for designers, entrepreneurs, and tech professionals. All of their programs are taught by industry experts. And as a small local business, they're proud to have supported Boulder's creative and technology community for well over a decade. BDA's classes cover a wide range of subjects, from digital marketing and video production to web development and graphic design. Learn more at boulderdigitalarts.com.